Well, we may not have any hot news, but we certainly have some humid news. This is Fragments of Silicon.
Are you actually playing that?
It is pre-recorded, but we did have it recorded live for us.
Yes.
That's cool.
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and we did have it playing live way back in the day, but that was several lifetimes and cast changes ago. Anyway, welcome to Fragments of Silicon. I am your host, Adam. Joining me are my colleagues, Golix and Pettyfan. And I suppose we can get right into the news, such as it is. For those who might be new, our format goes like this: personal news, interview, what we call the topic of discussion, a topic on a particular game or thing that's going on in the video game industry. Like our guests are not required to be a part of that part, but anyway,
They're welcome to if they want to.
yes. Anyway, so let us get to the news. Petty, why don't you start us off since you had to go to the hospital again?
Yeah. What was it? Friday? I was having a lot of abdominal pain. So I didn't know if I passed the pill cam from that study I had last Monday. So luckily that was all fine. It was either my IBS acting up or something else. I see the GI doctor in October, so hooray, my body is falling apart at 29.
Distressing.
Yeah. And as far as like other life news, not a whole lot's been going on. Mostly been, playing video games and doing the card game thing on Sundays.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. It's your go, Golix.
Pretty slow week here. It has been very hot and humid for Maine, at least, which I know doesn't quite match up with Florida, but still. Luckily it's supposed to get a cold front in on Friday that should bring it back down to 60s, 70s, I think.
Yes, those temperatures.
MS Saga on Sundays with Mac is still going well. Thankfully he has actually been working on grinding off screen to keep the TV more interesting. And I've made some good progress in Skyward Sword HD, which I did not play the first time around on the Wii, so that's been pretty cool. I think that's about all I got.
All right. I guess it's my go. Let's see. I suppose biggest thing that happened to me there's like yesterday is running into some intestinal distress. Now, not sure if that was some medicine mixing or spicy chicken nuggets, but yesterday was not pleasant, let's just say. Like, outside of that, finally convinced my brother to pull his kids out of school because I don't know if you've been keeping track of the headlines. This state is not exactly coping with COVID really well right now.
Yeah, your governor is the one who's saying, I don't care, you definitely can't require kids to wear masks.
Yes. Yeah. So, and even also keep in mind, vaccines aren't quite available for small children yet. That's not hitting until the end of the year. So, yeah, bad tidings.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. I guess in game news, I've been playing a bit of Quake. Since that got a out of nowhere remastering. Courtesy of some friends of the show, actually. Like And that will be relevant later on in the season. Like, let's see. Also been playing a lot of Jupiter Hell for review this week. And yeah, that's my news. Not much in, the goings on, such as it goes. Anyway, merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Thor of Pirate Software.
Hey, what's up?
Not much. How about you? How are you doing tonight?
Doing good. Just got off the stream. Whole community's here. Was waiting to, start the interview stuff. So ask away, man.
All right. So how we like to get started is we like to get to know the person behind the game, the studio, all that jazz. And we do this by starting with this particular question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Well, it's actually been something in my family. So my dad worked for, in the game industry. He was in AAA. He worked for Blizzard Entertainment for 23 years. He was cinematic director for Blizzard for all that time. So he worked there all the way back from when it was Silicon and Synapse, and then it was Chaos Studios, and then it was finally Blizzard. So everything going all the way back to like rock and roll racing and things like that. So I kind of grew up in a game studio, and I grew up in the industry. Then when I got older, I started making my own stuff. I started building my own things, and eventually I applied to Blizzard. I ended up getting a job there in QA, and I worked all the way from QA all the way to a senior red team specialist position, which is offensive security. And through that whole time, like I did stuff for the different game teams. I worked with everybody on, everything from World of Warcraft Vanilla all the way to Overwatch. The only thing I didn't touch was World of Warcraft Burning Crusade. So working all the way through all of that, I just, kind of grew up in that. I think the first thing that I did before all of that, though, before I got into actual like video games, was Dungeons and Dragons. I started making D&D campaigns. I'm super into it. In fact, under my desk right here is a massive wooden box with like, rope handles on it and all this kind of stuff that's filled with all my D&D stuff. I use it as my footrest, hilariously, but that's all my D&D worlds in there. So yeah, I grew up in the game industry, man. Like I grew up in the game industry. I grew up making games, and I'm probably just going to make games until the day I die, to be real with you.
Fair enough. You might be the first person we've had on the program that's a second generation video game developer, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount of us, to be real with you. Like, it's not that old of an industry, frankly. But yeah, second generation and super into it. I always have been. I think the thing that gets me about it is there's nothing quite like making something and then seeing the reaction of somebody else going through that. So if you build an experience, whether it's in Dungeons and Dragons or a video game or something like that, if you build that experience and then you see how it affects somebody else, either emotionally or, you can see it in the facial expressions, things like that. There's nothing quite like that. And it's really nice. It's really cool.
We can relate, since, we don't make video games, but we make, webisodes about video games. Like,
sure.
Anyway, so I suppose the question that comes to the forefront at this point is, what made you decide to leave the world of AAA, leave Blizzard, and go, indie?
Well, to be real with you, working conditions at Blizzard were pretty trash. I don't know if you guys have seen the news, obviously, all that stuff that's going on, but I'm really glad that the state of California is going after Blizzard, frankly. I saw a lot of really terrible stuff when I was there. It was quite sad. I reported a bunch of things when I was there, and eventually I left the company due to poor pay and poor working conditions. I ended up going to Amazon Game Studios, which is right up the street. And Amazon Game Studios had a lot of the coworkers that I had there were people that had been fired from Blizzard for misconduct because it was right there. It's 4 minutes away. So the thing is the industry doesn't forget. So after I saw that, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to double down on offensive security. That's what I'm going to do. So I left AAA and I worked for the United States Department of Energy. I got picked up by the U.S. federal government, and they had me hack power plants for them all across the U.S. I got flown around the country, hacked power plants, and turn in vulnerabilities to make our grid safer. And I did that for a long time up until like half my team quit, hilariously. And I was thinking about...
I can imagine why the team quit.
No, it was a fine job. They just wanted to go do other stuff. They just wanted to go do other things. So there's about 7 of us, and 4 of them quit at the same time. Nothing wrong with the job. It was a great job. Super fun. We got to do some wild stuff. Work with industrial controllers, stuff I'd never done in my career. Some of the best hackers I've ever met, dude. Awesome people. But yeah, we quit, or they quit, and then I ended up quitting right afterwards because they wanted to up my hours from 10 weeks a year, and the rest of the time I was at home streaming, to 30 weeks a year, and I'm like, I don't want to fly 30 weeks a year. I just can't do that. Like, I don't want to not be at home 30 out of the 52 weeks of the year. It's ridiculous. So I quit, and then I was going to take a week. I was going to figure out what I wanted to do, maybe go back to Amazon and like go do the security job because they'd offered me a security position there. And 2 days later, Jacksepticeye played Heartbound, and the game blew up. And I was like, well, not doing anything else. I'm just going to do this.
So this is your full-time occupation, as it were.
Yeah, I've been doing this full-time now for about 4 years, streaming and making Heartbound for about 4 years now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like, and I'm assuming you're a solo indie dev?
No. So there's three of us. I do the programming, writing, and design. Shay does art and animation, and then Stein does music and sound effects.
Okay. And are you all in proximity, or is this all remote work?
Oh, no. So Shay actually lives with me, and then Stein is in the Netherlands, so all remote.
Okay. All right. So with that background in order, I suppose we should get to Heartbound here. So for those who might not be familiar with the game, what is this particular thing?
So Heartbound is an RPG about a boy and his dog with tons of different routes and different paths through it. One of the things that I really don't like in a lot of games is when it claims that there is a bunch of choices for players, and then those choices don't resolve in any tangible action in the game. It's something that has always really, really heavily bothered me. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to create something where every one of the things that you do actually changes something somewhere, whether it was small or something rather large or, something in between. So what I did was, instead of making it so it's like yes, maybe, or kill the guy, like in a lot of games, it's everything you do. Like if you're in the hallway there, click that light switch. Oh wait, no, you should have done it before when you were with Baron. You're not with Baron anymore. Don't worry about it. But if you flick the light switch a whole bunch of times, you can actually piss off your dad. And that changes the way that your interactions go with him for the rest of the game, because you've made him angry in the beginning of the game. Like, there's little things like that all over the place. Do you leave the lights on before you leave a room? Do you interact with an object before you interact with a character? Do you interact with the characters first? You more, curious, where you check out a whole bunch of different stuff? Or are you more based on the main storyline quest where you want to do that? It's butterfly effect, and it's actually implemented. It's not a pie in the sky thing. It's not a maybe. It is already in the game and already in the early access.
Right. And I suppose another thing about choice is it's not just having them in there, but having them matter. Usually it's maybe a big choice, but not a lot of little choices. So
yeah, what I wanted to do was get away from people who were doing like save scumming and things like that. So save scumming is generally like you save the game, you make a choice, you reload your game, you keep doing that over and over. I wanted the player to not know every time they were making a choice. I wanted it to base itself off of the kind of player they are, not just the choices they are choosing to metagame. And it's worked out. It's worked out really nicely. I mean, the game's got 96% positive reviews on Steam because of it. So I'm really happy with the results, and I'm really glad people enjoy it.
And that sounds like a monumental and difficult task.
Yes. Yeah, you could say that.
It sounds like you would say that as well. See, I'm wondering how many choices are there in the game, but I'm guessing, like an exact number would be kind of spoilery.
No, there's no exact number. Like most routes that you see, think about it this way. The game takes about 2 hours to go through a single route right now, about 2 to 2.5 hours. There are people that play the game for over 100 hours and haven't found everything. There are usually between 16 and 32 different routes for each interaction on average throughout the game. If you actually look at this combat that you're about to do, you can lose this combat, you can win this combat, you can win this combat by not getting hit, you can win this combat by getting hit once, you can win this combat by having 1/3 or 2/3 of your health removed, you can win this combat by almost dying, and all of those different routes actually change something later on in the game. So there's a ton of this stuff all over the place that changes things, even small amounts. And think about it this way. Later on in the game, Lore gets punched in the face by one of the characters. If he's never been hit before in combat, he remembers that. And he goes, wow, I've never experienced something like this. Or if he has been beat up in combat and he's died, he remembers that. So every little thing that you do changes this character in some way.
That is interesting. And looking at the combat here, well, it's very Undertale inspired from my vantage point.
Nope.
Like,
so the inspiration for this is actually WarioWare. So Undertale is bullet hell games only. Mini games was really what I was going for, and that's all WarioWare. WarioWare, I love it, dude. I absolutely love the direction of WarioWare and how that works, and just tons of weird mini games with different objectives for each one of them. I like Undertale's combat; it's quite cool, but it is only bullet hell, And I wanted to do something different, something interesting and new. And WarioWare was the direction. It's very fun.
Yeah, not a bad inspiration to pull from. Honestly, more games could do from taking from WarioWare.
Thanks.
Like, yeah.
I guess using micro games for combat and other things is an interesting way of handling it. Keeps it from getting boring.
Yeah, it keeps it from getting boring, and it lets me theme it around the character. Like, that was the thing that I interesting is I was like, WarioWare is super fun, but WarioWare was interesting because it's really random, right? It's like, pick the nose or drive this car, or like whatever it's going to be. It's always really weird. But with this, I can base it around the enemy you're actually fighting. And I can invert it on itself where like certain fights don't work that way, or certain characters fight differently. Like there's all kinds of stuff like that. I think it's become quite fun for me,
Right. And you call this a role-playing game. Are there any sort of traditional role-playing mechanics?
Such as levels and experience?
Yep.
Nope. No levels, no experience, no random battles, only boss battles, and playing the character. At its heart, a role-playing game is you are playing a character. You're playing a role. And the other good joke about it is a role-playing game because role is an anagram for lore, which is the character that you're playing. So it's a lore-playing game.
Right. So it's a role-playing game in a more true sense of the word, I guess, is a good way of putting it.
Correct.
It's like, it's. I can definitely see the Dungeons and Dragons inspiration here because you're playing a character.
More like, have you ever played old school Super Nintendo RPGs like Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore, things like that?
Yeah,
that's really where I pulled a lot of the inspiration for storytelling from, was those old school kinds of Super Nintendo games. Because I really enjoyed the like kind of emotional impact that they had on the player, and the kind of crack humor that they did. Things like Earthbound did that as well, really, really well. Yep. That's the kind of area that I pulled for storytelling, because it's just that style of game. It's that old school style of game, and for me, it feels timeless. Those types of games are always going to be fun. They're always going to be interesting, and I wanted to bring that back. I want to make more of those.
I mean, certainly understandable. Though I can't say that we've been exactly starved of, classical role-playing adventure kind of things, especially on the indie scene. But like I said, this definitely stands out because it's not, you're drawn from the well of the old, but this is not a thing you would have ever seen on the Super NES.
There's no way to do it. Like some of the stuff that I put in there, a lot of the lighting in the game, if you actually look at if you go walk near that window there, for instance, that lighting is actually fully collision-based lighting. The way that it's working is not with masks on the character in any way. It's actually light beams colliding with the character model and then diffusing into his body based on the strength of the light. So if you stand there while the lightning goes off, you can actually see it will play against his model as if it was a 3D model. That's not a 3D model. That's all done with math. And that's all done completely on the CPU. And if you look at your actual task manager, you'll see that Heartbound's usually taking between 1% and 4% of the CPU for most modern CPUs. So like the thing runs wicked fast, and like Super Nintendos couldn't do that kind of stuff. There weren't ways to do that kind of thing back then.
I don't think there was really anything that could have done that.
Without a lot of expensive coprocessor stuff in it.
Yeah. Like that's the kind of stuff that would have set the Super NES on fire.
Yeah, it just couldn't do it. It didn't have the power to do that kind of thing. So like that's the kind of stuff.
It was pretty good at faking some stuff, but yeah.
That's the thing, is I wanted to add some of that like new game flair, things that we can do now, just a little bit here and there, but still make it true to that old Super Nintendo like kind of feel,
Right. Now, in terms of like the actual combat, is every single battle different?
Yes.
Okay. And like like you drew from WarioWare for like the inspiration, but was that like the structure, like the actual things you do?
No, it was just I want to make a whole bunch of mini games, and WarioWare was a whole bunch of mini games, and that was it. Nothing else got pulled from there.
To rephrase, what kind of mini games are you doing with the combats?
It's based on whatever thing you're currently fighting. Like if you guys get all the way through the tower, right? That's about I don't know, about an hour and a half in total gameplay to get there. That mini game is completely different because it's based on a boss that works on gaslighting. So she gaslights you, and you have to remember the things that you did earlier in the game in order to fight that boss. And that's the whole point of that, is each one of these are going to be based on some kind of mini games or some kind of selection or some kind of, information that has to be displayed on screen, and you have to choose or play the mini game to fight them in their realm, whatever it's going to be. With the Bargus, which is the thing you just fought, that's a physical battle. It's trying to fight you straight on. You are playing mini games to dodge its attacks and attack it back. With the tower, the boss fights you more of a mental thing. So it's based on gaslighting and, choosing the right thing in the right direction. Works the same way, though.
Okay.
And that's already in the game, by the way. Like, that's not like a planned thing. That's an in-there thing. Some of the other encounters that we've been doing, I'm actually working on Animus's boss fight right now. That one's split into 4 parts. So that one is more like the Bargust in terms of mechanics. And I think it'll be quite fun. It'll be really interesting to do.
All right. And how much of the game is currently complete?
So all of Act 1 and Act 2 are completed right now. Animus, which is Act 3, is like 70% completed. And then Act 4 is like 20% completed. And then the final act, I'm not revealing to anyone. Not yet. Right, we build it all live on stream every day over on twitch.tv/GoPirateSoftware. So I've been a partnered streamer on there for about 4 years, and I just make the game every day, every single day on there.
Right. And how many people usually watch you in a given day?
Usually between 100 and 150, somewhere in there.
Not bad. Like, and
yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, we just have like a cool community of people that it's not just people who want to, hang out for Heartbound either. It's people who want to make games. It's people who want to talk to someone who's been in the industry. It's people who want to learn how to build a game. It's people who want to start streaming game dev on Twitch. It's all kinds of stuff, And it's fun. I really enjoy it. I think that being a game developer on Twitch is a very, very good thing right now. And it's one of those things that's kind of overlooked a lot of the time, where people don't realize, hey, you can actually go stream as a game dev, because there's no category for it on Twitch. Twitch, come on, please. Twitch, please. Make us a category already. But like, that's the thing, man. It's like, because of Twitch, because of streaming our development on Twitch, because of doing it in this route, I don't have any publisher or any investors. We own 100% of our games still. And that is something that is very, very rare in the indie scene right now. And I'm super, super happy for that.
I mean, I suppose that depends on which part of the indie scene you're focusing on. Like, we get a lot of solo small teams who, don't necessarily stream their game, but they own their game is what I'm trying to get across here.
Sure.
So,
but the thing is as a studio, that the only source of income is this. We went all full time, This is the way to do this. If you still have a day job, sure, you can do that. But if you want to go with a publisher, most publishers today want 30 to 70% of your game's income, and a lot of them ask for the IP for it. That's a really rough spot to be in, where you think, hey, man, this third party is going to be able to sell this game better than me. I'm going to give them all of the money, the future money for my game, and maybe it'll work. And then there's no guarantee that it does. So having all of that in your own control and having a separate source of income, which is like your community can support you and you can support them by showing them cool stuff and like talking to them and interacting with them, Twitch is a godsend, man.
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting perspective. Like I said, we don't get a lot of people who stream the game devs, and
and they should. We should have more of that, to be honest with you.
Like, I mean, I
suppose it's also a good way of getting feedback earlier in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
I'm like, I suppose switching tracks here a bit to talk about a part of the game that we haven't yet, and that is the music. Do you make the music? Do any of your cohorts make the music, or is that contracted out?
So, like I said earlier, I do all the programming, writing, and design. Shay does the art and animation, and Stein does all the music and sound effects. So all the music in the entire game, all the sound effects in the entire game, that's all done by Stein von Wakeren. They're also the developer that has created Here Comes Nico, which is up on Steam. Awesome little platformer game, really, really cool. And yeah, they make all the sound effects and music for the whole game. We actually have 94 songs in the OST now. And we put in the OST that's up on Steam a whole bunch of songs that are actually just remixes of the songs in the game. So the OST has stuff that does not exist in the game. It's put there specifically to make it so that it is worth it to buy the OST instead of just ripping the sound files out of the game. You actually get some extra cool stuff. And if you buy the OST, all that money goes to Stein. I don't touch any of that. It's all theirs.
Right. And do you have like a final track list planned, or is it kind of play it as it gets developed?
When it's done. Yeah, when it's done, man.
Fair enough.
And 94 songs is pretty huge.
I know.
So I'm already pretty happy with it.
I get that, but you did mention that you've only got you got 2 acts completed, the 3rd act near completion, and 2 more still to be developed. So that does leave the room for quite a bit more in the way of music. Yeah. So
we're still hammering it out. Should be good.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that applies to the overall development timeline. Like there's no set plan on, or roadmap as they call it, to getting Heartbound feature complete 1.0, all that terminology.
No, and the reason why is because I take each one of these sections, I build them, and then I send them out to the community. We gain feedback from that, I tweak it, and then we move on to the next piece. I know exactly what it is that I need to make. I have a full roadmap for myself that I've made public a number of times of things that I need to actually build, so I know exactly what I need to build along the way. But I include the community in every single one of these things. Every time I build anything, the community is included with this. Every time I make anything, I make it live on stream. Every time I release something, I get feedback from them, and we fix it along the way. And we also translate it into, Brazilian, Portuguese, French, Spanish, Russian, and Japanese. So there's quite a lot of work to go into the localization side of things as well.
That's an impressive amount of localization. And
yeah, it turned out really nice, to be honest with you.
Let me see here. So in terms of platforms, is this game Windows only, or are there builds for Mac and Linux?
There's builds for Windows and Linux. We're going to also be launching it on Nintendo Switch, and we'll be launching it on the Steam Deck once the Steam Deck gets out. So Steam Deck will be the first one for like console kind of gameplay. And the reason why is because we will be able to put the unfinished build on there, where it's the early access build still.
Right.
For Nintendo Switch, we're waiting until the game is completely finished. We've already been approved for that. Nintendo likes the game. We like the game. Once it's done, it'll be on the Switch, and I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, I could definitely see this game doing really good on the Switch.
Yeah, I mean, it feels right. The gameplay feels correct for it. The control scheme feels correct for it. It plays really nicely. So.
And this is also not the kind of game where you're going to have to make compromises for that particular system. What
do you mean compromises?
It's got less development power. So we've had devs on the program who've had to rework their game for the Switch to compensate for that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I don't think that would be an issue. Like, this game is, Heartbound is ridiculously efficient, absurd.
That's
one of the things that I spend a lot of time on working.
Being ported to a smart fridge.
yeah, it did. Heartbound, it works on a smart fridge. It works at 60 FPS on an Android watch. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah. I guess along those lines, are there any formal plans to port the game to mobile at any particular time?
Nope. Yeah, no, not putting it on mobile. No plans to.
I guess that'll be up to the community, at least Android. Apple stuff, it can be done, but you do have to work a bit harder. Jailbreak, that sort of thing.
I'd really rather not have people do that, to be honest with you. The thing is if you start taking copies of the game and putting it on other platforms, what you end up leading into is people putting it up on crack sites. When you do that, you end up getting people with third-party malware. One of the things that I put into it specifically is an anti-cheat or an anti-piracy system, and all it does is it pops up an add-on saying, hey, you should go talk to the developer. You know, the game has a bug in it. Screenshot this and send it to them. It actually shows like a little like rainbow text and stuff like that. And when they do that, I give them a free copy of the game more often than not. And the reason why is these third-party sites, like what you're talking about, is like, loading it up or recompiling the game. Most of them put malware in them. And all that's asking for is it's asking for users to get malware on their machines. And I don't want that to be a thing. I don't want our players to get impacted by that. I'd rather them have a good time rather than me getting paid.
Makes sense. Like, and let me see. In terms of pricing, is the game going to remain at $9.99? For the entire development process? Is that going to increase as acts get released?
No, it's never going to increase in price. It's always going to be $10 US. I also localize the prices really heavily. Like if you look at Brazil, right? Brazil is actually a huge amount of our studio's income. Brazil was the first community that really liked the game, which is why we localized it in Brazilian Portuguese. So the average household income in Brazil is about 1,100 BRL, which is about 180 US dollars, between 180 and 200 US dollars. If you're asking them to buy a $60 game, grand majority of them are going to pirate it. That's just how that goes. That's super normal over there. As piracy is super normal. And a lot of game devs actually shy away from putting their games in Brazilian Portuguese, thinking that community will just pirate it. So here's what I did. I made it 62% off in Brazil. The game's like $3 there US, which comes out to about 20 BRL. Out of $1,100 1,100 BRL, that ends up being a really good deal for them. Brazil is now 20 to 25% of our studio's monthly income. Not our sales. 20 to 25% of our monthly income comes from Brazil because we localized our game and then localized our prices. So I'm really happy with the price point right now, and I'm really happy with our global and regional price points because people absolutely love them, and then they're able to support us and they don't feel bad about it.
I mean, yeah, this is why regional pricing was introduced in the first place. Not just like Brazil, but Eastern Europe's a good example because piracy high and prices being high. It's no good for actual game sales. It's like people notice when you actually do effort in that direction. So it is good to hear that that's been working out for you. Yeah. And let me see. I think I've run through my gamut of questions. I'll see if my colleagues here have any further questions for you.
I think I'm good.
I piped up when I had something, I think.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I'm good.
All right, then. Thor, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us here today. The game looks super interesting, and we certainly look forward to see, the rest of the game develop. And indeed, we wish you luck in your future streaming endeavors.
Sure, man.
Yeah. And indeed, if you liked what you heard here tonight, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Do all the things that you need to do to keep up with the broadcasting. And the game is Heartbound. It's available now on Steam Early Access for $9.99. You can also get the OST bundle for $4.99. And Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, welcome to the topic of discussion. Let's see. So this week we are talking about Simpsons Hit and Run. If you're wondering why we're talking about the Simpsons Hit and Run, it's because it was actually in the news recently. Somebody decided to recreate the game, or maybe a segment of the game, in the latest Unreal Engine. And that's actually really impressive because we are talking about a licensed game here. A licensed Simpsons game at that.
A licensed
But,
Simpsons GTA clone.
yes. I'm like, but just to go over, the overall history of Simpsons games, most of them were god fucking awful.
Yep.
Aside from
I know-
that very first arcade game, which was quite fun, if not exactly true to the later developments in the series.
Well, that came out like when season 2 was a thing.
Yeah.
So it was very,
Look, I'm just throwing it out. Not all of them were horrible. That one was fun as an arcade game.
Right. But on the, it was more typified by a fucking virtual Bart or
Yes.
Simpsons Wrestling or Bart versus the World.
Bart's worst nightmare.
I could go on. Like, no, seriously, I could go on because good Simpsons games, you're counting them on a Simpsons finger. Sorry, Simpsons hand. Yeah. They were, they were rare, very, very rare. Simpsons Hit and Run is, considered to be, if not the best, it's the second best. It's like it's between this and the Simpsons arcade game, which is, a bit apple to oranges, quite frankly, because they're two very different games from two very different eras. Like, I'm not sure how you really straightforwardly compare the Simpsons arcade, a arcade brawler to a sixth generation GTA alike.
Well, and one of the reasons why it did good at it, but one of the reasons that that's such a, I guess, appealing concept is because for people who have watched The Simpsons way more than I have, you really get a feel for Springfield as a town with people in it, and this is a game that actually lets you, explore it.
Right, but it's not the game that mapped Springfield, believe it or not. That came with a previous, I hesitate to use the word game, it was more interactive experience thing, Virtual Springfield, that actually literally mapped Springfield. They didn't have a map for it before that game came out. But yeah,
and of course, even afterwards, physics and geography and stuff are take a backseat to comedy when needed.
Right. Though that being said,
I watched a video on the Simpsons house recently, and it's like, they change stuff to be funny frequently.
Well, yeah, they call it flexible reality. They're not really worried about, keeping congruent logic and physics and all that stuff. It's a comedy show. Now there were times when the Simpsons fucking went too far, but that's neither here nor there. Like, though, it's not just, exploring Springfield, because once again, not just like virtual Springfield, but just like 2 years before Hit and Run came out, you had a game called The Simpsons Road Rage, which was a flat out Crazy Taxi clone. Like, to the point where Sega sued the parties involved, and actually,
you're not allowed to use the yellow arrow that tells you where to go.
That probably was part of it.
I think that is literally what they resulted in.
Yeah,
that Crazy Taxi owns the yellow arrow,
or at least did at the time. That patent's probably expired. Because keep in mind we're talking about 2001, 2005, 2004, whenever that was settled. Point is, patents only last 20 years, so that'd be about expiring if it hasn't already. But getting back to The Simpsons Hit and Run, the question might come to what makes this game the best or near the best? What makes this game good? And it's a combination of things. I mean, first of all, the actual gameplay is good. Though I will say it is held back by the systems that it was on. Because while it's a GTA clone, it's not what we call an open world game, not as we would define it today, or even back then, because it's actually stage based, not just you got sections of the world and you can't access them until the bridge is fixed. You've progressed through enough of the game. Like the PlayStation GTA games did this kind of thing.
They actually have other world state changes.
Yes, you when you complete enough of the story races, you will get a cutscene, and then you will move to a different part of the city via a level transition. A traditional level progression thing, at least as we understood it at the time, which actually made it quite a bit different from other GTA style games of the age, because they usually yearn for the true unbroken open world, where The Simpsons, not surprisingly, wasn't really concerned about that. Basically broke down into three sections. You had Evergreen Terrace. Let's see. You had the downtown Springfield area, and then you had the docks. I'm remembering. It's been about like 15 or so years, maybe more, since I last played this game. Played it a lot in college. And so it's got a good base, because it's also more accessible than the GTA games were, because The Simpsons is a bit more family friendly than Grand Theft Auto. I don't know if you've noticed. But I think the thing that really puts it over the top in terms of not just the Simpsons games, but games in general, is its presentation. Because, okay, first of all, it made 3D Simpsons work about as well as it can work.
Which is tricky because they have significant cheats in their character designs normally.
Yeah, a big one of which is they're really not designed to be looked straight on.
Mm-hmm.
They are actually literally designed to be at side view or 3/4 view.
Yeah, the noses get weird.
Yeah.
And you don't have it, and you don't really have a division between the eyes very well.
Yeah, and keep in mind, when these are 2D characters, that they're drawn 2Ds, and transposing those kind of character designs into 3D can result in horrifying monstrosities.
Yes, it can be simultaneously 100% accurate and also 100% wrong.
And there's definitely some of that in Hit and Run, especially the cutscenes. But and part of that is because we are still talking about the PlayStation 2 era.
Mm-hmm. The era where they did not quite have 3D stuff nailed down.
No, they did not. So it's a testament to how good the game is that you really don't hear comments about the Uncanny Valley, or how it does. Because I will say, you want a 3D Simpsons game that really caught the spirit of the Simpsons in 3D. That's the Simpsons game, because it went in on the cell shading, and cell shading was definitely a thing in the PlayStation 2 era, but that didn't become really overused until the late stage of that particular era. 2003, cell shading was still very, very new. We're talking the same year that The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came out. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the option for The Simpsons to look more like cartoons existed, but wasn't really in consideration. Also, I think that has something to do with the engine of choice, because The Simpsons Hit and Run was built off of the RenderWare engine, which was the Unreal engine of its time. seriously, I think about a quarter of PlayStation 2 games were using this thing.
Now, did the first Unreal Engine exist at this point, or
We were on Unreal Engine 2. I'm like,
Because
But
it wasn't used as
consoles
much?
at the time couldn't run that. It was PC only.
Gotcha.
like Unreal Engine really didn't become the massive thing that it became until Unreal Engine 3. Until,
Mhm.
you know, it intersected with consoles that could actually run it. Like, but yeah, you know, like some other very popular games of the age that ran renderware, just off the top of my head, the PlayStation 2 Grand Theft Auto games, for example. The SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Let's see. I believe the Burnout games, which would make sense because that was this engine was developed by Criterion. Like, you know, and I could go on, but that's not really about it. But the thing that the Simpsons Hit and Run had going for it, it had the actual Simpsons talent involved. Not just the voice work. It's got all the voices, or at least no, it's got it, including Hank Azaria, which is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is really, not only is he renowned for being difficult to work with, but he's also renowned for not really being available for Simpsons spin-off materials.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like one of the characters you actually control is Apu, which was until the past few seasons he was the voice of. You know, and the controversy that enveloped into, like. Anyway, it's also got writers. You know, it had the actual Simpsons writers of the time, and honestly, it's better material than the actual Simpsons writers were producing for the show. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Michael Scully era, especially at this particular stage. You know,
What seasons is that?
This is like seasons 10 to 13, 14, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, this is like the peak of Jackass Homer, for example. You know, just when he got really fucking mean-spirited. You know, this is also the era when The Simpsons just completely fucking abandoned all semblance of logic. You know, this is like where episodes, you know, Saddlesore Galactica and Bards of the Future come out. Dark times. So anyway, you got all that. It's got, of course, it's got the deep cuts that you would expect from a Simpsons game. You know, it's not just, oh, look, here's the Simpsons family, and here's all the secondary characters you might know. Like, it's mainly in the vehicles. Like, you know, you'll get to drive Mr. Plow, Plowmobile, and the Plow King for that matter. You know, you get to drive Bart's soapbox derby racer. You know, get a vehicle from Hank Scorpio, or at least indirectly. He didn't actually appear because they weren't going to pay Albert Brooks to appear in a video game. That would be very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but you know, overall, you know, the point is, it's got a lot of Simpsons, what they would call fan service these days. Like, let's see. And it's also a bit weird in terms of its construction, because it's kind of a hybrid of it's a driving game with like platforming exploration elements. That is to say, it's got collectibles, and you have to do some light platforming to get some of them. You know, namely in the you got to get the Buzz Cola tokens and the cards and the I believe they called the jokes. You know, they had gags that you can activate. You know, one of the problems with only having 3 areas is they recycle those. Like, because, you know, they say they have 7 stages, but, you know, they end up reusing the sets
with some changes.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. You know, like the Evergreen Terrace does get changed in the for the last episode or area, or however you want to define it, to be redressed as a Treehouse of Horror episode. As another thing that they boldly proclaimed about the game is, turns out the nemesis of the game isn't Montgomery Burns. You know, in fact, the first level is kind of a jab at that whole thing. Like the whole premise, the whole plot is somebody's using Buzz Cola to mind control people to do nefarious things. And you've got to solve that by driving around and destroying WASP cameras. As far as the actual driving, it's solid, though the game gets very, very difficult, and quite frankly, tedious after a while. Like, it runs out of ideas. And the actual, especially if you're trying to get 100%, it can be a bit of a grind. I personally think it, as a game, it's solid, 7.5 out of 10. Like, I wouldn't say it's better than any actual GTA game of that era. But like I said, it's a good Simpsons game. That is not only a good game, but it is a good Simpsons game. That is perhaps what intersects the Simpsons arcade game with Hit and Run. They're both good games, and they're both good Simpsons games. It's just the Simpsons arcade game is hampered by the fact that it came out in, around the time, season 2. It's early season.
It's hard to have real deep cuts when the show is only 2 seasons in.
Yeah, it's like there literally wasn't a lot to work with. That's why a lot of the generic goons are generic goons and, generic bosses. If this were coming out season 6, season 7, yeah, they'd be able to do a lot more referencing. That was just based off it's a good Simpsons game based off of the 2 seasons or season and a half probably of material that they had available. Anyway, so yeah, I think that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments Silicon. Let me see. So the week ahead, well, let's see. We do have a new episode of The Last News Desk on the Left available coming up about half an hour, actually 40 minutes. This one, and let's see. The week ahead, outside of this, sorry, I hate this. I was on the wrong page. Here we go. Yes, on Friday, August 27th, we'll be having Stefan Sava of Shade Bob Games. We will be talking about the game Infinitrap Rehamstered. And yet it's a 2D platformer starring a hamster. So look forward to that. And let me see, on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Jupiter Hell, Observer System Redux, Freddy Spaghetti 2, and Mirlo Above the Sun. So until about a half an hour from now, I shall wish you good gaming.